Hello? Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our live stream. It takes a couple minutes for this to start streaming everywhere, so we won't jump right in. But I wanted to, I'm Debbie Moynihan. I'm COO of White Wizard Games, and I'm just going to be here at the beginning to introduce myself and the panel here with Rob Dougherty and Darwin Kastle, who are joining us. This is the Meet the Wizards live stream where you can ask these guys anything. You can ask them what they had for breakfast. You can ask them, you know, how they win at Star.
We won't necessarily answer anything.
Yeah, they won't answer, but you can try to ask them anything. Yes. So, and we've taken questions from the community. So I have many questions. I'm going to take myself off screen so that you can see the two, Rob and Darwin, a little bit better and ask, but I will be, you'll hear my voice asking questions. I'll be reading questions both from the comments. So please ask questions live in the comments. And then also we took many questions from the community before this event started. So I'll be reading some, and some of them are pretty interesting questions. So I think we're in for a good session here. The session's scheduled for 2 hours. It may not go, we'll let it end naturally. Wherever it ends naturally, it may not go that long. That you might keep these guys on longer, you know, if you have a lot of questions, a lot of burning questions. And I think starting out with just an introduction, each person introducing themselves and just chatting briefly about what you do. Because I know people always ask, like, what does the COO do? What does the CEO do? What does the creative director do? So Rob, if you want to start with an introduction of yourself and
sure,
what your CEO job is.
So I'm Rob Dougherty. I'm CEO of White Wizard Games, and so we're a relatively small company, so we wear lots of hats. So I design games and I do development on games. You know, that's not normally part of CEO role, but that's but you know, that's stuff that I do in addition. As the CEO, I basically plot the path for the company. I figure out what products we're going to be making, what we're going to be doing with the digital apps, which printers to work with, all the big major decisions. Of course, the entire team, I don't make those decisions in a vacuum. Like, basically, we discuss as a group, you know, like and to talk about where we want to go, what we want to do. So in a lot of cases, I sort of lead that discussion. So in the end, I'm responsible for making those decisions and figuring out, you know, what we're doing as a whole. So that's sort of the CEO part of the job, and as I said, a lot of the more fun stuff, which is the designing and developing games.
Thanks. And Darwin, can you share? We're a small company, so we all do a lot of everything, but Darwin, can you talk specifically to being a creative director and how that role works here at White Wizard Games?
Yeah, certainly. So as Debbie mentioned, I'm Darwin Kastle, the creative director, and it's much like the title suggests, my role focuses on the more creative aspects of the company. I don't do as much of the business aspects, but the two main things my role focuses on, one is game design and development. So part of my job is to come up with games that we might want to publish, and that involves, you know, design work on them, and then for existing products to, you know, further do game design, like for a new set of Star Realms or a new set of Hero Realms or a new set of Epic. I'm usually heavily involved in that sort of thing, both the design and the testing and development of them. Which, you know, that's part of the important creative process, because that's what our company is about, is making games. But a really important part of the creative process for games is the visuals, in particular for my department, the art. So I work very closely with artists and our art director, Antonis, on making sure that we have art for all of our products that's appropriate and that helps illustrate the games and make them look good and fun to play with.
Just following up on that, we get a lot of questions into our support email and just through various social media channels from artists and illustrators. Can you talk a little bit about how, and I forward them all to you. So can you, and sometimes Peter, if they're in Europe, can you talk a little bit about how you think about artists when I ask them to please, send their portfolio link to you. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how that works?
Yeah, so you usually send me at least one new artist portfolio a week. Some weeks are 0, but some weeks will be 3 or 4. And I look at them all, and I try to give an answer to everyone who's interested in working with us. The main things I'm looking for is, do they have art in their portfolio that is strongly suggestive of a fit with either an existing project or an upcoming project? I find, for example, a lot of artists, when they're just filling up their online portfolio, the art is either very dark or really focused on just 1 or 2 colors, or doesn't have much background detail, which might suit the purposes of the types of projects they do or whatever, but might not be as well suited to the kind of card games we make. We tend to, the style we use for our card games tends to involve lots of detail, including the background, and very bright and colorful art. Like, when you're doing it online, where you can blow it up on your computer screen and it's backlit, maybe it doesn't need to be as bright and colorful. But I find for a small piece of cardboard, which is where most of our art ends up, it really helps to have something that's really bright and colorful. A good example is our flagship product, Star Realms, which, if we were really focusing on just realism, in the darkness of space, everything would be dark and drab. But that wouldn't make for a really appealing game product from an art perspective. So we tend to make the art for Star Realms unrealistically bright and colorful, but yet still look appropriate for science fiction, at least the way it makes you feel when you look at it. And so I try to find artists who, just by looking at their portfolio, like, oh yeah, this is the type of thing that would go straight into one of our games. I also try to say, well, based on their portfolio, do they look like they've got the skill set and the skills, even if they don't have anything here that looks exactly like what we want, but at least suggests they've got the skills and the skill set to make what we want. I'm sure occasionally I pass over an artist who is capable of doing exactly what we want, but I just can't tell that from their portfolio. And other times I'll contact an artist who their portfolio looks great for us, but once we work with them, the styles don't match up. But I try to do my best just based on their portfolios, and then I contact them and see if we can work something out.
Okay, great. Well, we'll probably see some more portfolios coming in now that we've talked about it. So we have a question from the audience. When Rob and Darwin play head-to-head, do they still have that old school rivalry, or are they cool?
Yes. So that's one of the, for me, I think that's one of our sort of great strengths as a company. Our games have very strong 2-player head-to-head play. Like, we basically Star Realms, Hero Realms, Epic, Sorcerer, all these games, while they can be played with more players, and for a lot of people, the multiplayer play is the most fun versions, they're very, very good 2-player, and they're resilient to high-level play. Some games are kind of fun 2-player games, but if you sort of get into them and really try and figure it out, you can actually figure them out very quickly, and they sort of the fun breaks down once you sort of are really playing it competitively. Yeah, Darwin and I both love to win, and we love to rib each other, while playing. And I've definitely gone on significant losing streaks versus Darwin, or winning streaks versus Darwin. And yeah, hey, Darwin.
I feel like for me, and I think Rob probably agrees to a certain extent, and you can feel free to correct me. Even before we had a game company, one of my favorite things was playing competitive games with Rob, in part because he's such a challenging opponent and such a creative opponent, and we both really like playing strategy games. And it does seem like a elaborate step to create an entire company just so we can spend our days doing this. But they say you should love your work. So yeah, like I do find the highlight of my day is in particular when I get to do testing with Rob. Obviously, that was a little easier when we were working in person instead of working remotely like we are now. But I'm looking forward to more in-person testing in the future.
Yeah, and one of the advantages of the fact that we are competitive and do really like to try and beat each other down is we'll ferret out the sort of weaknesses in a game, pretty quickly, because like, oh, if you like, for example, early on in Star Realms, it looks like it was easy, but getting the balance of things like, bases, defenses, so you aren't you don't have a scenario where every single game somebody turtles behind a million bases, or they make sure that getting discarded to the point where it's viable but not overwhelming, and having scrapping be important but not absolutely required. Like when we had various stages in the balance where one of these things was off, we'd figure it out pretty quick and be rushing to get that thing so we could smash the other person. So it was pretty easy to figure out, okay, yeah, this thing's too good. We're both going after this and ignoring other paths. So improve the others, tweak that down. So that if you're playing casually, it doesn't really matter. But it's going to be good with or without that for the very casual level play. But the fact that it has that sort of resilience at high level competition means that you can really dive deep into the games. And for example, on Star Realms, there's people who have played tens of thousands of games online, and they can just keep coming back because there is a lot of depth there for the strategy.
So we have questions about all of our products and future products. This
Cool.
First question that came in from Sai is, he would like to know, he or she I would like to know more about what your plans are with Epic going forward. You had some events for it. They weren't able to travel to those conventions. Are you thinking it'll be more digital versus in person?
Yeah. So a nice side, one of the few good side effects of the terrible global pandemic situation we have going on is it's sort of forced us to look at our events, because like we love going to conventions and doing events in person with players, and super fun, and we will do that again one day. But for the short term, that's just off the table. So we're doing a lot with events digitally. So several things with Epic. It's got actually built-in organized play stuff. So if you're a competitive player and you want to climb the mountain, Epic's already got that in there for you. So basically, there's these things called gold tickets. You can win a gold ticket by winning the arena in Epic for that week. There are actually 2 winners in the arena. And you don't have to spend any money to do this competition. You can if you want, but you totally don't have to. You get a free entry into arena every week, and one of the 2 winners will be the player who gets the most wins in a row. So if you go on the biggest winning streak, like let's say you win like 15 games without losing a game, then you might be the leader in the longest win streak. And in order to defeat you, someone has to come along and win 16. Et cetera. And then at the end of the week, the person with the longest streak of wins will be one of the arena champions. We also have an arena champion, which is the most total wins. Obviously, they might be the same person, but you could also be 2 different people in that I could play a game, win, play another, lose, re-enter, paying some gems, win a couple games, lose, re-enter, and all those wins add up, even though there's losses in between, toward that largest number of wins. So one of them rewards sort of players who are willing to keep coming back and fighting. The other one rewards someone who has the ability to get that giant win streak in a row before they get a loss. If you win that, you get a golden ticket. You can use a golden ticket to enter our monthly championship, and the monthly Epic Championship currently has a $500 cash first place prize, assuming you're in an area where you're allowed to get cash prizes, and there's also lots of digital prizes as well. So if we get a lot more activity in Epic and a lot more players, like basically we're making some improvements to the app, and we're going to be doing a bunch of marketing once those are done. And if the player base grows gigantic, those prizes could grow bigger. But just right now, you can play for a $500 prize fully digitally every month. In addition to that, we're doing things like at this weekend we have a Legend Series tournament for Epic that's being run in conjunction with Gen Con. In that, if you win, you become a card in the game. So we will make a card in the future, and that will be a card that will be in a future Epic set. And so one day you'll be able to play Epic and play your card on the table, which will have your image on it. And our artists do a really cool job with that. So we will one day have physical events again, but for now, we're really focusing on the digital. And actually, Epic's kind of a bit ahead on that, because as a newer app, the infrastructure was part of the goal from the beginning, so they were, that was worked in. But we're looking at taking that tournament capability and bringing it around to our other apps as well.
Great. I'm also scrolling through some of the comments here so people can see the comments that are coming in from different platforms. I really like this combination of words, delightfully garish, for Star Realms art.
Yes.
From Jack. So there was a question that had popped up here. Are we going to see dwarves in the new Guardians Epic set?
We are not going to see any dwarves in the Guardians Epic set. Sorry. Not their setting.
One of the nice things about the Flavor X, so an additional thing I do as creative director is I have a lot of involvement in the flavor for our games, including helping figure out what the IP will be for the games, meaning what will the setting be like, what will it be, fantasy, science fiction, what will the world be like, what will the people in the world be like? Obviously I'm not the only person who works on it, but I do play a role. And one of the nice things about Epic is the way it's designed flavor-wise is so wide open, because the idea is you're playing gods who are sort of creating your own setting to battle in. And so, one day you could be in a completely different world to the next. And so it'd be very easy for us to eventually create a set where dwarves played a big role, even though they don't currently. We're not really limiting ourselves with the flavor for Epic, which is one of the cool things about it.
Yeah, definitely. There's just the story behind Epic, where basically gods are remaking reality, and the game of Epic is basically two gods wanting to change reality in different ways, and they settled that in the mortal realm. In the backstory, like basically previously they just remade reality however they felt like, and that caused the universe to break, and so now they remade the universe, and now when they want to do different things, they battle it out in the mortal realm through their champions. And so that's sort of the story behind it. So yeah, we can really go anywhere within the in the Epic universe.
This question is pretty interesting. Dan the Meek would like to know if you're familiar with the Ascension Tactics Kickstarter. Yes, we are.
Yeah.
We have.
In fact, I am a backer of the Ascension Tactics Kickstarter.
And do we have any similar plans for spin-off games for existing IPs?
So basically, we don't have any current plans for
certainly something we talk about
within our IPs, but we don't have any current plans for like a Star Realms board game or those sorts of things. However, it is stuff that we've discussed frequently. We do have a product which is in the pipeline, which is kind of similar to Ascension Tactics in that it's a tabletop game with miniatures and deck building. Do we have that?
Well, I was gonna grab it, and then I realized, everyone can see my arm on the video.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So this is Robot Quest, which will be coming to Kickstarter later this year. It's got a super cool IP. It's anime style, and I'm one of the little robots from there. Basically, you've got people build these cute little robots of various types, and they do battle in an arena. So it's kind of like Pokemon-esque in that you're battling with your friendly minions, and you can use your energy so you have a hand of cards, just like in Star Realms. You gain energy. You can use that energy to power your robot to move around, to power weapons and such. And you can also use it to buy cards. So it has there's this really fun sort of trade-off while you're playing, and it's got a very video game-like feel in that you're trying to blow up all the other robots, but when you blow up a robot, when you get blown up, it's no big deal. You just respawn. But you get points every time you blow somebody up. So you're trying to accumulate the most, blow up the most robots, and it's totally fine if you get blown up. No biggie. You just respawn. So it's got this sort of fast, frenetic play. But that's not obviously not in the Star. That's not a Star Realms in the Star Realms universe. So it's but we have a game in the sort of same general category of deck building miniature game.
Okay, great. And so the next question is, you answered this question with the Robot Quest example, but we asking if you have games where in fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, are there other settings that you would like to work with in the future? So
yeah, yeah, exactly. So we're fans of all things geeky, basically. So we've got these sort of anime sci-fi with Robot Quest. We've got a superhero game, Kapow, which we've got coming soon. This one uses customizable dice. This will actually be the next thing coming to Kickstarter, and that'll be pretty the next few months. Knock on wood. We'll have the Kapow Kickstarter ready to go. So both of these games, by the way, were done by out of house. So they're not Darwin and I's designs. Star Realms, Hero Realms, Epic. Those are all designs by that Darwin and I did ourselves, but we've been taking in games from the outside. So Sorcerer, for example, was outside designer Peter Schultz. Then Perfect Day did Robot Quest, and Two Ton Porcupine did Kapow. And yeah, we love working with all these guys. It's super, super fun, meeting and playing games with their game designers. And Darwin,
I just want to say that Peter is no longer an outside designer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Peter is now So Sorcerer originally came from outside the company, but Peter is now is now part of an awesome part of the team. He actually leads our European team, works with a whole bunch of artists. He does like a combination of stuff that Darwin and I do in Europe, working with play testers and artists, and doing moving the things along the Sorcerer.
He wears a lot of wizard hats.
Yes. But yeah, so we've got comic books, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, anime sci-fi. We'll have, I'm sure we'll have more genres, and we've played around with with some others, but I'm sure we'll have more genres coming down the pipe eventually.
And there's still lots of room to explore fantasy and science fiction and horror. Like we're only scratching the surface, and
Of
those
course,
are
yeah.
kind of our favorite genres.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just want to mention that I added a link in the comments. If you'd like to enter for a giveaway, we're going to do a giveaway towards the end of this. You don't have to stay till the very end to win a prize, but you can fill your name in there. This next question, are there any plans on making a co-op gameplay in Star Realms campaign driven, like in Hero Realms?
We have a product coming for Star Realms, which is incredibly awesome. It's called Rise of Empire, and it is it's a legacy Star Realms product which tells the story of the birth of the Star Empire. And so this is it has a basically story-driven episodic campaign where you play a game and one player plays Star Empire, one player plays the Trade Federation. Now this is PvP. But it has sort of continuing story, and the stuff you do in the previous games affect the next game. And basically, as the Star Empire, you're going to be trying to convince the nearby systems to join the rebellion and fight against and fight for independence against the Trade Federation. As the Trade Federation, you're trying to put down the rebellion and convince the local systems to remain loyal to the Trade Federation, and basically those conversions that you make during games, you'll be convincing individual ship captains and bases to come to your side, and you can literally change cards from these neutral factions that they start out as to join the Star Empire or the Trade Federation, and then they stay that faction for future games. So it's got some really cool continuing story, but it is PvP, so we don't have a cooperative storyline currently in the pipeline. Although obviously we've made cooperative missions, which is one-shot things in the Frontier set. So we certainly could do a story-driven, multi-session cooperative thing in the future. Is just not in our current pipeline.
So one of my favorite things about the upcoming game product that Rob was just talking about is it addresses some of the things I see coming up in the chat here about people wanting to know more about Star Realms lore. And that game in particular is really delves deep into Star Realms lore, and it's very lore oriented. So people have been wondering, like, how did we get here with the Trade Federation and the Star Empire and stuff like that? They'll really learn a lot of backstory by buying and playing this game, and really get a really meaty piece of lore from this game. And I think that
absolutely, yeah,
that fans have been looking for, and that's something I'm really excited about personally.
Okay, so one comment on the giveaway: when people want to fill in their names, the form was inaccessible. It should be accessible now, so just let me know in the comments if you still have problems. I'm trying to moderate this and get that form working. Rockford wanted to know if we haven't considered novels or short animated features because of the lore is so rich, and I don't know.
Yeah, so we have considered novels. So obviously, primarily we're a game company. So our main focus is on the games and creating worlds for those games. But like our core concern is the games and the gameplay. However, the lore is definitely a piece of that, and and Star Realms does have a super cool universe, and it of course grows over time as we make new sets and etc. We had one independent novel that was done, and we've been in talks actually for quite a while with a company that's interested in doing a series of books in the Star Realms universe, and so that's something that we're super interested in, and is sort of slowly going forward in the background, but basically the work on games takes is our primary focus. So it's something that we're looking at doing by partnering with people outside of our company who that's all they do. Doing the novels and the storytelling.
So we have a question about, I'll just comment on that book thing, that we are in the contract finalizing an agreement. So that is moving along, and I hope that we'll be seeing some activity in that over the next, few months. And we hope to be sharing, short stories as the novels progress.
And in the short term, for people who are really interested in Star Realms lore, I recommend checking out the Star Realms digital campaign in the digital app, because we go more into lore there than in most other places. So you can find out a lot about Star Realms lore just by playing the campaign mode in the digital app.
Yeah, and it's fun playing the game along the way.
True.
Okay, so we had a question about the Deluxe Nova collection. So if they bought it through our website, so what they mean by that is they're a late backer.
Late backers,
a late backer credit. Can they get add-ons with that? So that's a pledge manager question.
Yeah, so that's actually more Debbie's area. So if you Debbie's the Chief Operations Officer, and she deals with a lot of the operations and logistics that goes along with that, including the insane amount of work that goes into delivering like thousands and thousands of games all around the world when we do a Kickstarter. So there's a lot that goes into that. Normally, I believe the process is that late backers do get into the pledge manager and are able, and with a credit. So like, let's you late back for X dollars, and then you go into the pledge manager with that credit and use it to get that goes toward your toward the reward tier that you want, and then of course there's shipping, and you can add on widgets. Is that the way we're handling it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you do back on the store, which I can post the link here in a moment to the store if anyone's interested in checking that out. You will get access to the pledge manager. Generally, in the pledge manager, at a minimum, we would have the Kickstarter exclusive items as add-ons, and we've also had a lot of demand for sleeves, because we've had some issues with the availability of sleeves, and people obviously want all their sleeves to match. So I would expect that you'd be able to do Kickstarter, and generally the product line that the Kickstarter is for. So in this case, Star Realms, we would have more add-ons in addition to the Kickstarter exclusives, and then also sleeves for each of our products, so that anyone in different regions where it's hard to get our products in stores can add sleeves on as well. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Oh, you might want to just comment on the Deluxe Nova collection, Rob, in case some people aren't familiar with what that is.
Oh, so Deluxe Nova collection. This is back in January. We did a Kickstarter for a deluxe version of Star Realms. This is a Kickstarter only thing, so it's not going to be in the distribution channels normally. Stores we're able to back to get a limited number of copies, and of course Kickstarter backers could get it. And basically, it's a all foil version of the first sort of block of Star Realms stuff. So it's the base set and the crisis packs. And the gambits, basically all the stuff that came out in sort of that first like year and a half of Star Realms products, promo pack 1, so all those sort of early Star Realms sets in foil, in a super sweet large box with a game board, with large score dials. We're in the process. I don't know if you can see this with the camera here. Probably not so great, but
show it to me.
But basically, we are. So that was something we did on Kickstarter. We've been working with the factory, getting samples. Debbie and I actually do a Wizard Weekly stream on Tuesday mornings, and on that we showed. We show prototypes and stuff as we get them in. So we've been showing off like the foil cards we've gotten, the score dials, those sorts of things. But basically, we didn't want this product in regular distribution because we didn't want to confuse new players as to what Star Realms is like. So Star Realms is obviously a very inexpensive game. $15-20 gets you a set, and you can play that a million times and have tons of fun. And of course, there's lots of sets out there. You can buy extra stuff. But we have so many people who love Star Realms and really wanted just a really beautiful, blinged out version of the game. So we made this deluxe version, Kickstarter exclusive, and we're in the as I said, we're in the process with the factory of like getting all the components just right before we go into mass production on it. And so if that's something you're interested in, you can go to the White Wizard Games page, and the links in the on the page. So yeah, but yeah, so you can lay back if you want to get down into that, and it's I believe it's $100 set, and it's got big box foil board, great score dial, so super pretty. You can check out the Kickstarter page to sort of see all the bells and whistles that are with that one.
All right. Very cool question from Ori Kagan. First, I just want to do a shout out that he does the coolest videos for Star Realms. I'm going to post a couple links, or maybe he can post them in here because I'm trying to do a few things over here on the side. But he would like to hear about the life of a card in one of our games. How does it start? How does it get to completion? If you can give an example of one that had a lot of changes during the process.
Sure.
A more interesting one, that would be great, or maybe a couple of examples. Maybe you can each give an example.
Darwin, do you want to start on this one, like sort of the process that you go through for making up a card?
With the exception of promo cards, we don't generally design cards in a vacuum. Usually they're in the context of a new set for one of our games, and then let's say we want to make an expansion for Star Realms. We figure out, well, how big of an expansion, how many cards do we want in the expansion? And usually we try and decide, well, we want to make sure we have the same number of cards for each faction because we don't want to upset the faction balance in Star Realms. And then we want to have the same ratio of ships and bases that we have in the base game to keep that consistent because we want the overall play feel the same. So then we also need to decide, well, what should the costs be? Because we don't want to radically change when you're buying cards or acquiring cards out of the trade row in Star Realms. We don't want them to be all just one cost ships and bases or all 8 cost ships and bases. So we want to keep the general amount of cards at the different costs consistent. So we might be making so we're like, okay, we need a few more things that cost 1 or 8 or whatever. So we sort of try and divide that out. But once we have a feel for how many ships and bases we want for each faction and of the different costs, and okay, we need 3 of this one that costs 1, but only 1 of it that costs 8. Once we narrow that down, then we can get into the nitty-gritty of the actual design of the card. So a lot of times I'll already know that I want a 7-cost Trade Federation base before I even start thinking about, well, what will the base be like? What will the flavor for it be? What will the art be? I just, okay, this is what I want. Okay, well, what would make a good 7-cost base for Trade Federation? So then I start thinking, well, what's Trade Federation good at, and what is it known for, and what will feel very Trade Federation? So often I'll want to think about a trade and authority gain. Sometimes if there's already in that set a lot of Trade and Authority game. I want to do combat as well, because that's something that Trade Federation also does. And I also want to think about, well, what have we already done a lot of? So I wanted to do it a little different than what's existing to make it interesting. And what makes it unique from the cards we've already made, and what sort of needs will it fill, and what will make it exciting. And we also have to compare it to existing 7-cost cards. So a lot of times I'll take out all of the 7-cost bases for Trade Federation as a comparison spot, because I don't want it to be way more powerful or way less powerful than the existing 7-cost bases. One of the things that makes the Trade Federation interesting is some of their bases are outposts and some aren't, so that gives us some flexibility where, like, the blobs generally never have outposts and the machine cult generally only has outposts, but we have more design space with Trade Federation because we can do it either way. But once it gets up to 7, usually you want something that has a very severe impact on the game. But if I had been making a base that cost 2, I want a very little impact on the game. It's very important to think about how it affects the game at different points. A 7-cost card that, let's say, gave you 5 trade, let's say it's a base, it gives you 5 trade and is not an outpost and does nothing else. Well, while it's powerful to have 5 trade that just stays in play every turn, it's a terrible use of 7 trade in the late game, because if it can't stop any incoming damage or combat because it's not an outpost, it doesn't produce any combat, it doesn't gain you any authority, the only thing it does in trade, well, in the late game, it's kind of like, who cares? Like, oh, I hope I draw something useful because the game's almost over. There's only going to be a couple more turns you draw, and it only gives you trade. That's not that useful. So it's one of the important things, especially if it's something that's very expensive, is making sure that in addition to having some use in the early game, that it'll be useful in the late game, in particular for things that you're investing that much trade in. So while it may be something that produces trade, does it draw you cards? Does it give you authority? Does it give you combat? Does it prevent combat by being an outpost? So you'll find almost every card has multiple functionality. Like a good example would be Port of Call, a 6-cost Trade Federation base. Yes, it gives you 3 trade, which is great in the early game, but even if you draw out the last or second to last turn of the game, not only is it a 6 defense outpost, which is great for helping you not lose, you can scrap it to destroy an enemy base and draw a card, which is a way to help you win. So I think that's something that this is something I struggled with when I first designed the game, was having cards be multi-dimensional like that. And I think you'll find that almost all of our cards are multi-dimensional like that now. I mean, obviously some will be better in the early game than the late game, or better in the late game than the early game, but I think that's important. So once I've sort of designed what the function of the card is and got a general card balance, then we have to think, well, what would it, in this lore, what would that look like? Well, if it produces combat, would it be some sort of fortress or some sort of space station that's all about like troop movement, or why would it have combat, right? If it produces trade, well, in a lore sense, why would it produce trade? Is it a place that ships come to dock and move cargo back and forth? So now we have to think about a name and a look for a card that goes with that functionality. So usually we come up with the functionality first, but then we start to think about, based on the types of things we've done in the lore and the design in the past, what would be fitting, yet at the same time not be an exact replica of what we've already done. Like if we've made 5 cards with the name Fortress in them for Trade Federation, well, let's make one that doesn't say the word Fortress, but still has a military theme to it, that has a Trade Federation feel to it. So once we come up with a name and a sort of a concept for the card, then how would we represent that artistically? So with some artists, I might be very specific. I'll give them an art brief where I say, okay, this is the name of the card. this is the concept. Like, it's going to be kind of like a fortress floating in outer space and it's a very expensive card, so it's going to be a large fortress. So you know about Defense Center. Well, this one's going to be about 1.5 times the size of Defense Center, and it's going to have even more cannons and more armor, and plus there's going to be small escort ships flying around. Like, I can get into a lot of detail about the visual look I want for it. But with other artists, like, for example, our lead artist and current art director, Antonis, he has done so many cards for us and understands the game so well and played our games that I can just be like, I could just give him, okay, the card costs 7, Trade Federation, it produces 5 combat, and it's got a defense of 5, go. And he can then come back to me with 4 sketches and say, what do you like any of these? And I'm like, I like all 4. How do I choose? Okay, I want this one, but save these 3 for later cards because they look so awesome. Like, so it depends a little bit on which artist I'm working with and how much experience they have with our products, how detailed of an art brief I'll give them. But yeah, so that's the next thing, is giving an art brief. They make sketches. We go back and forth developing the art until we have a finished product that looks right, that goes with the name of the card, goes with the lore, goes with the functionality. So as you can see, these things all intertwine. The design of the mechanics of the card, the lore of the card, the art of the card. And once we get all that going, we need to then do testing of the card. So even before the art's done, Rob and I and other people can be playing with mock-ups of the card to see, okay, is the cost right? Is the functionality right? Does it feel too strong, too weak? We can be testing it while the art's being worked on. And then when the card's design feels good, the art looks good, then we can hand it off to graphic designers who will actually take all of that and put it into an actual card frame and with a text box and all that. And we can think about, oh, is there enough room for flavor text, and where should the ally ability be, and should there be an ally ability? All this thing can sort of, it's a process, and I'm sure Rob has some thoughts that might cover some things I left out as well. Rob?
I think we did a great job sort of going through thing, like basically from a physical standpoint, our cards start out as like really rough, like we'll type it up in Microsoft Word or something and print it out and cut it out with scissors and stick it in a card sleeve. So Darren and I will be playing Star Realms, but like everything on the table is just like little scraps of paper and sleeves with stuff written on them. And as we discover, this is too powerful, this is too weak, we're making changes on the fly as we're playing. We're going in there with a Sharpie and just like changing numbers or adding abilities or tweaking things. And then once we're done with the play session, we'll like go through the deck and like, okay, we changed all these things, and we'll modify our document, which has all the which has all the text for the cards on them. And it's always very exciting when we move from our super ugly playtesting proxies to the beautiful full versions of the cards with the artwork and the card frames, etc. So that's that's always a super exciting step for us.
I'm going to ask you a question that came in through social media before we were running this, because I know I have a lot of them, so I want to start getting some of those. Are there any Easter eggs in Star Realms or Hero Realms? There was a question that came in, and I personally don't even know the answer to this. I know we did cover some of the cool Easter eggs that are in Sorcerer. For those who are interested in Sorcerer, check out we did a Q&A with Peter Schultz, the designer of Sorcerer, and he had a lot of stories to tell about things that were hidden in Sorcerer, the game.
So the Sorcerer does have a lot of cool Easter eggs in it, but Darwin and I haven't really put a lot of the stuff like that into like Star Realms, Hero Realms, Epic. Occasionally there'll be a card that's artwork is based on a real person, but yeah, we don't really have much in the way of Easter eggs in the other games. Darwin, I don't know if you have anything on that.
I mean, I agree with everything Rob just said, but we definitely, well, not Easter eggs, we definitely do have influence from other sources and homages to other sources. When I was sort of designing the basic flavor for Star Realms, I was definitely influenced by a lot of novels I'd read and movies and TV I'd watched. The Star Empire was heavily influenced by the Honor Harrington series by David Weber. There's been multiple sources that influenced the Trade Federation. I mean, trade federations have shown up in multiple popular science fiction. The blobs are on some level my own thing, but they do have some influence, like the Tyranids from Warhammer 40K. They're obviously not the same, but there's definitely an influence there. And I think, again, the machine cult, like that's something similar to a little bit of 40K, Warhammer 40K and other things. So you can see a lot of classic science fiction in novels and games and movies have had an influence and sort of come together in Star Wars. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of Easter eggs per se.
Kind of thinking about it, I guess there's sort of one Easter egg-ish card that I can think of from Star Realms, which was in, I believe, the Frontiers promo pack. I was a huge Babylon 5 fan back so there's a base Azure 4, which is a nod to Babylon 5. There's a couple things like that where we have.
I remember before White Wizard Games when we were working on an old version of Epic called, it was a trading card version, and you had designed specific cards that were reference to the characters in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
So occasionally we'll have nods to popular culture things that we're big fans of. But yeah, I guess a little bit. But if you are into Easter eggs, Sorcerer is definitely has a lot of them. So that's Peter's really into that. So that's something you can see more in Sorcerer than the other games.
Right. And do you plan to keep the Legend series digital after the pandemic? When we can have conventions in person again, what are your thoughts on what we'll be doing with the Legend series?
We will definitely have in-person Legend series again at some point, in the future when it's safe to do so. We will, we love getting together with our players and in person. That's, it's super fun. And we've had really great get-togethers at conventions. We've even had fan parties where basically everybody, we invite anybody who plays our games to come to like we did something at what's the name of the place that we did that one, Deb? Do you remember at Origins where we had at the arcade?
Oh yeah, at Brucadia. Actually,
Brucadia,
it popped up on my calendar because I had a reservation to have that event there last night, and I was like, a really great community get together.
Yeah, so
I've done them in suites.
That was at Gen Con. Yeah. So basically, we love getting together with our fans live. People who like the games live. There's no replacing that. However, it's great, not everybody can travel to a convention, and people are people are playing the game in in Europe or in Asia or in Australia, and getting to a convention in the US is not a reasonable thing. So the digital events are awesome for that, and we do have an awesome online community through the Facebook pages, etc. So basically, we will definitely continue doing digital Legend series, and big events over time. And we want to we're working on the apps to make them more large event friendly. Epic is sort of is a little further ahead on that, because it's a more recent app that we designed, but that's something we're looking at bringing into Star Realms as well. So basically, in the future, we'll have both physical and digital Legend series events. But for the for the immediate future, we're going to be all digital for a little while. But yeah, once we can do in-person ones, we will do those. But we'll also do digital ones. So there'll be a little more digital action right now. But we're not going to stop doing digital ones down the road.
The good news is that we got the Epic app launched just in time.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic that we're doing them digitally because there's a lot of people that could not travel to, some of us are lucky, we live nearby or, have the means to get to these conventions. But I think it's awesome that people can come from anywhere to participate. And just another reminder that we have one tomorrow for Star Rounds, one for Epic Card Game on Sunday. So you do have the opportunity to become a card in the game, participate in those Legend series this weekend.
Yeah, you can still sign up. So you can jump on.
So related to that question, Dusto asked on the community page. Some people are envious. Well, I'm going to paraphrase here. How can we get those physical Scouts and Vipers, the alt art physical Scouts and Vipers? Some people are envious of those that actually get them. Yeah. Any possibility could retroactively give them to people who won events before they were available.
or people who helped design the game.
For people who aren't familiar with what he's talking about, we had a incredibly beautiful set of Scouts and Vipers made up to use as a tournament prize. So we did a big championship event for Star Realms and for Epic at Origins last year. We actually sponsored Origins, and we were like the primary sponsor of Origins, and we had big events there and big cash prizes. And in addition, every single person who played in the championship event got us, if they showed up in person and were there playing, they got a physical set of these alternate art Scouts and Vipers, and they also got a digital set of them. So every once in a while, you might be playing in the app and play against somebody, and they got these really pretty Scouts and Vipers. You're like, how do I get those? So that's how they got them. They competed in that championship event. Players qualified for that championship event either through qualifiers on site or by winning an arena in the Star Realms digital app, over the previous year. So those we definitely want to keep as prizes, but we may have events in the future which have them as prizes as well. Either prizes for winning or doing very well in an event, or maybe if an event's like hard to get into, it has some qualification criteria, it might be a participation thing. But yeah, those. So Dusto, sorry, we're not going to go backwards in time and give those out to people who did awesome back before that event. But going forward, we'll have them, and players with mad skills such as yourself can win them in future events.
All right, I have another question. This comes back to you and Darwin's skills as players in the game. This is from Brian. We call winning a game by completing a mission on each of your first 3 turns a unicorn. We know Darwin has bagged one, but has Rob?
Oh boy. I'm gonna say no. It's possible I'm wrong on that, but
to be fair, it is pretty difficult.
Yeah, so I don't think I've done that. So that's yet another area where Darwin is ahead of me.
I recommend playing with both events and gambits. It's really hard to make a unicorn without some extra help. So like maybe if you're going second and you've got the gambit that draws you 2 cards, or an event that comes to draw you cards, suddenly, you've done the play 7 ships in 1 turn on your first turn, and that allows you to buy something and shuffle. So suddenly you hit your event for the second turn. But it's really hard to do that without a little boost from either events or Gambit. So if you're interested in accomplishing this, Rob, that would be my recommendation.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of the neat things about Star Realms and the way it's packaged both physically and in the app is we have sets that do wacky stuff. So we've got like heroes that when you buy them, they come directly into play. We've got the events where crazy stuff will happen when a new card hits the trade row. We have the missions, which give these alternate victory conditions, and they really shake up the game. They make the play very different, but it's totally optional. You can, if you want to play with them, great. Physically, you can buy that pack and shuffle it in. They've got little icons on the bottom of all cards, so if you want to stop playing with them, you can just look through your cards, take them out. Or in the app, of course, you just click the little buttons for which sets you want to play with, so you can customize the game to be how you want it to be. If you like having the ability for bigger swings and chaotic stuff happening, events and a combination of events and gambits can really give you as Darwin was saying, it can really give you some really crazy ability for crazy stuff to happen early, which can be super fun. But if you're like, oh, I like to plan out my game a little more and I don't want anything crazy happening early that I can't really control, then you can just not select those sets. So it's really neat feature of the game.
Also, kudos to whoever came up with the term unicorn for that. I think it's very
cool. So we have quite a few questions. I popped up a couple of them here asking about when is Hero Realms coming to the app, and related to that, when is Sorcerer coming to digital, and also when is Commanders coming to digital in the Star Realms app. So lots of interest in what's coming and when.
Sure. So with the caveat that the digital team is not on this call, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Starting with the legendary commanders for Star Realms, that is being worked on currently, it's not the next thing to come out, but it is in the digital pipeline. If I had to guess, and this will probably be off considerably, but I would say probably about Christmas time frame for the legendary commanders.
So the good news is we've obviously had a Star Realms app for several years now, and our digital team is used to making new sets for Star Realms. And in many ways, Hero Realms is a similar game. So we'll be able to use some of the things we learned in programming Star Realms to program Hero Realms. However, we definitely want Hero Realms, the app, to have its own unique feel that's different than the Star Realms app, and to give you some playable options that are different than with Star Realms. So we're going to be doing programming that we haven't done before, and we want to have its own look and feel. And we've set the bar so high with the Star Realms app and the Epic app that we don't want to just release something for the sake of releasing it. So there's good and bad news on that front. But the one thing I'm sure of, well, I'm not sure when it'll come out. I'm sure it's going to be very good.
Yes, yeah. Basically we can't, I can say we are definitely doing a Hero Realms digital app at some point. A considerable amount of effort has already, gone into that process. We're not at a point where I can give you a win. Is it going to be available? As Darwin said, we're not going to release a halfway version.
And we've learned from experience that we're bad at predicting when these things will happen. I don't know if the digital team is better at predicting it than we are, but we're definitely bad at it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna avoid giving a date, but obviously Hero Realms has a huge number of fans. It's a game we love, and part of what Hero Realms is that that sort of adventuring as a particular character feel, which really separates it from Star Realms once you add in the character packs to the game. And we want to make sure that we deliver a game that's really fun and also doesn't feel like you're just playing the Star Realms app again. So yeah, there's a considerable amount of work in going into that, but yeah, we're not close enough to be able to say any kind of date prediction on the Hero Realms. And as for Sorcerer, that's in the would be nice category. So one of the big challenges for me for a Sorcerer digital is some of the things that make Sorcerer great and engaging as a physical game make it a little challenging as a digital app. So a lot of times when you play a big board game, and that lasts like an hour or hour and a half or whatever, when you play it, your turns can be very boring. Like, okay, it's Darwin's turn. I'll come back in 6 minutes, after he's done doing whatever he's doing. Sorcerer does not have that. Like in Sorcerer, you are always just about to do something. I take an action. Oh, I'm going to spend my action. I'm going to draw 2 cards. Immediately, it's Darwin's action. Darwin's going, oh, he played that champion in that location. Oh man, I got to deal with that. All right, I drew this card. I want to play it. Oh, I need to get energy. I'll gain 2 energy. Now it's Darwin's turn. Oh, he draws cards. So basically, back and forth. I do something. He does something. I do something. He does something. And then in the combat, it's the same way. I attack with a guy. Then I roll my dice, and I'm like, oh, that roll's not so good. I'll tweak. You spend an omen to tweak this. Pass it over to Darwin. Darwin's like, oh, I'm going to spend an omen to reroll that die, and then back to me, and then back and forth. So those are great for the physical play because it keeps you constantly engaged, and always you're just about to do something. So it's never like, oh man, I'm just going to go to sleep and see what happens. You're always like right on there. So especially for asynchronous play, that's a big challenge for digital because you're not doing a lot in a digital asynchronous game. You want to do a lot of stuff, then pass off to the other guy and come back later and see it. For live play, it's a little bit easier, but still those kinds of omen tweakings and stuff could be a little challenging for the digital. But basically, we would love to have digital versions of every single game we make. Sorcerer, work on the Sorcerer has not gotten anywhere past sort of the concept of this is vaguely something we want to do. So
we're not saying no, we're just not saying yes. And also, I want to correct the record here about Rob saying he better wait 6 minutes for Darwin to take his turn in Star Realms. He's projecting. Rob's the slow one.
Oh yeah. No, it's not Star Realms. I was talking like a game like a big board game, where
sure.
Yeah, so,
But you're still projecting.
Darwin would then have to wait 20 minutes for me to take my turn. So yeah.
So, okay, we have a question. This came from the Star Realms fan created community page. Would you be open to doing, I really like this idea from Brad, a small Star Realms tournament of White Wizard Games employees versus players?
Ooh, I like it. He
said he has some extra promo cards he can give the prize.
So that's a really cool idea. So we do one of the most fun things we get to do as a company is occasionally we will run tournaments of our games internally. Like we'll be testing some functionality in an app, or we'll be testing a new set of cards or whatever, and everybody will play, and we'll have a little bracket, and and doing those internal tournaments are super fun. It'd be a blast to do one where it was both company and fans of the game. So yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I love it.
We have occasionally done stuff kind of like that. Like there's a Star Realms digital format on the fan page on Facebook. There's a Star Realms fan page on Facebook, for those who don't know, called Dodgeball. And I do remember one time when they were signing up teams, Rob and I did play on a dodgeball team briefly, and that was pretty fun. So, we don't do it all the time, but we do. And I did notice someone asked in the comments if we accept challenges. Speaking for myself, yes, I have the crazy username of Darwin. If anyone wants to challenge me to a game of Star Realms. I don't know if Rob has time to play as much Star Realms as I do. But
yeah, so I also challenges. My username is Rob. I do, unfortunately, in addition to doing the designing games and running the company, Debbie and I also have 7 kids and a dog. So so basically that my time is a little more limited, but I do occasionally I do occasionally accept challenges and battle away. So yeah, for sure. And I'll frequently I play in the arena almost every week, as well, and do some online games. So not as many games as Darwin, but I'm definitely in there.
Yeah, I'm thinking now that we have Darwin set up to stream, he does some Star Realms streaming.
Oh, nice.
Well, since we broke the bank for this beautiful light to go with my camera, it would be a shame not to use it once in a while.
Absolutely. So, what are some of this is from Brad as well, favorite individual Star Realms cards of any cost or set, and do you have preferred strategies or deck types you like to play?
Darwin, you want to take this one?
So my favorite Star Realms card is Embassy Yacht. It's from the original core set of the game, and we have a lot of cards, especially in the core set, that are sort of basic building block cards. Like, okay, this one gives you some trade, and if you ally, it gives you a little bit of combat or a little bit of authority. Or if you ally, it's combat. If you ally, it draws you cards. Some relatively basic cards to build the framework of the game upon. What I really liked about Embassy Yacht was there was more to it than that. Like, it gave you true trade for 3, which is a little bit on the low side, but it also gave you 3 authority. So it's, didn't seem super powerful, but a reasonable card. But if you happened to get 2 bases in play first before you played it, you'd also get to draw 2 cards, which drawing 2 cards in Star Realms is awesome, especially for a card that costs 3. So I like having a card that sends you down a particular path to set it up. And so I can be almost building my deck around it as I'm playing it in order to almost complete this side quest of, I got 2 cards in play, 2 bases in play, and played my Embassy Yacht. I find it just very satisfying to complete that slightly more difficult condition than just an ally ability. And I like the name and flavor of the card and the art of the card. I like pretty much everything about Embassy Yacht. So that's my favorite Star Realms card. It's a little bit harder to choose my favorite card in Epic, but I guess I'd have to go with a card called Muse, in part because I feel like the artwork for it is really underrated. Like, when people talk about their favorite art, including people in the company, no one ever says Muse, but like, it's just so colorful and so uplifting, and a lot of the things we do in our games are very dark. I mean, see Sorcerer, for example, and which is okay. Like, I like that stuff, but something about Muse just makes me feel good when I look at it. Not to mention, it draws me extra cards, which is, I guess that is a combination, a theme from both Embassy Yacht and Muse, is getting rewarded with more cards, which is something I like in almost any game I play. What about you, Rob?
As far as like strategies, I of course like to sort of look at the state of the game and come up with, sort of try and come up with a foil to what my opponent is doing. But I think I'm the most comfortable with a sort of a combo style strategy. So basically, I'll go like aggro, beat down, base turtling, authority gain, all kinds of different paths to victory. But the one I'm happiest if I land, if the game state is such where it makes sense to go there, is one where I'm like thinning out my deck and drawing a bunch of cards, and can get to the point in the game where, as I'm buying new stuff in the turn, that ends up being, the only cards in my discard pile, and I trigger card draw effects, and I draw the card I just bought, and can sort of plan out my whole turn and do some crazy, crazy hitting for like 60 damage on the final turn of the game. That's a direction I really like to go in. I'm a big fan of the Star Empire, and I love like the Imperial Frigate as an example of a card that I like a lot. Not something I'm going to be buying in the early game, but super happy picking stuff like that up in the mid to late game. And I think mechanically in Star Realms, I think my favorite mechanic is the scrap mechanic, where basically you've got these powerful effects that you can unleash at the cost of losing the card forever, and sort of figuring out when is the right time to do that. And like a lot of times the cards that I'm most excited about getting have powerful scrap abilities. So.
So this question that just popped up is a specific question. My friend and I are trying to design our own semi-co-op fantasy card game, have trouble sticking with the game mechanic. And there's another question, just a general question. Any advice for, aspiring game designers, game developers that either of you would have for them?
Yeah. So my advice on this is, make a game for fun. Make a game that you want to play, and play it with your friends. Tweak it, and you don't bother thinking about selling it or producing it until you get it to the point where your friends are constantly begging you to play it. Like if you're anything like me, when you first design a game, you'll ask people to play it with you as a favor, and there'll be a bunch of stuff that goes wrong during the game, and you're like, okay, I can tweak that, I can fix those things up, and you sort of iterate through that process. And at some point, if things are going well, it'll transition from them doing you a favor, playing through this game you're working on, to you doing them a favor. Hey, could you come over and bring that game? Basically, when you get to the point where you are playing it and with new people, and they're like, hey, can I borrow that, or can I get a copy of that? Or, basically, if you ask somebody, hey, did you have fun playing that? And they're like, oh, yes, that's nice, but that you're not ready. Basically, unsolicited, they should be asking you, hey, I want that. Can I get it? Is there can I take this copy? Do you have another one? Do you have one in your bag? Can I go to a photocopier and just and just make a copy of this right now? Like that's the stage that you want to be at for taking that next step. And if you and then you can show it around to to publishers, or if you have a large amount of money that you would like to burn in a fire, you can try the self-publishing route, which I've had lots of fun with over the years.
So I have some thoughts on this as well. So to the specific question about having trouble sticking with a game mechanic, if that's the case, you probably haven't found the right game mechanic yet, because when you do, you'll probably become really wrapped up into it and really want to work on that one. But I think you shouldn't be afraid to use your favorite existing mechanics. So when I designed Star Realms, it was at a time that I was obsessed with deck building games. I'd played lots of Dominion, lots of Thunderstone, lots of Ascension, and I was just really enjoying. It was a point in my gaming life when I was just really enjoying deck building games. Like obviously, I've played lots of trading card games like Magic the Gathering or Versus or whatever. I've played lots of board games, your Ticket to Ride or what have you. But I just really was obsessed with deck building games. I just thought they were such a cool mechanic, and in the bigger scheme of things, a relatively new mechanic. And I just felt, okay, this is my favorite type of game to play right now. How can I take what's out there and make it better and have its own independent feel? So like in order to have a good game that people like, you don't have to invent something completely new. Like you can take something that's already out there and make it more to your liking, and very quickly it can become its own independent game, even though it was inspired by existing games. So especially for your first game, I don't think you have to necessarily invent something completely mind-blowingly new. If you do and it's fun, great. But for your first game, it might be better to just sort of stand on the shoulders of some stuff that's already out there and develop that. And then if that can teach you lessons, that will be really helpful when you are trying to design something completely new and different that no one's ever done before, which is in this industry very hard to do because there's a lot of game designers and a lot of game companies. But if you can, great.
Okay, great. So a question that came in from Instagram: after having the success of pure card games, what was the deciding factor to do a game like Sorcerer that had boards, dice, and tokens? Big fan. He's a big fan, by the way. It came from Brad. Yeah. And related to this, Alex here is asking, what does it take to make a tabletop game? So, Sorcerer came in from outside the company. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what it means to take on that type of project.
Sure. So I've done various types of games in the past. I've had many game companies and always like self-producing, self-publishing. So I've done board games in the past, games with board components and dice and and various other elements. So one of the things I love about working with cards is they are very easy to produce. Individual cards are inexpensive, yet they can convey imagery through the artwork, and you can do a lot of different stuff with them. However, like there are things that you gain with play boards and with dice and with miniatures that you can't capture with cards. So with Sorcerer in particular, it captured a lot of the feel of games that I had loved for many years. When I was young, I played like back in like the 1980s and 1990s. I played a lot of like Warhammer imagery, like moving units around, big piles of dice. So that sort of like dice chucking feel can be super fun. Obviously, I've played a ton of trading card games when Magic came out in the mid 90s. I got really into it and love that sort of deck crafting and card playing feel from those types of games. And Sorcerer had elements of both of those styles of game, and also like conveying that game has such intricate and beautiful artwork and graphic design that stuff that Peter worked for years on crafting. I felt while we could have taken Sorcerer and been like, we're going to boil this down, make it a less expensive product, have have decks of cards, small dice. You can this player board stuff. You can do that without actually having a board. We'll just have like a reference card and maybe like a little die to track your energy or something. Like we could have made it a smaller, less component heavy game, but for the feel and the visuals of the game that it just felt right for that game to have those styles of components. And certainly there are games where where miniatures and those sorts of things just they provide the feel that you're looking for in the game. So so basically, the reason why we started with cards and we're heavy on cards with this was one. It was an area where Darwin and I were both very comfortable with the play of those types of components, and also production cost wise. One of the things we did with Star Realms, which was really outside of the box, is no pun intended, is we took it out of the big box. So basically, at that point when Star Realms came out, all the deck building games were in big box, in box format, large box format, and they were like $40-$50 games, and but everything besides the cards wasn't central to play. And one of the things that Darwin did with Star Realms is really boil down the essence of deck building play in a really beautiful way. And so we considered having a standard large box, and that would have been the safe approach to go. But we decided, what, we're gonna go with a little tiny box and make it $15. So basically, we spent a lot on artwork. We basically made art that we considered to be considerably better than anything that was out there at the time for a deck building game. So we had what we felt was better visuals, better gameplay, and put it in and then basically charged like a third of the price that other people were charging for it by putting it in a tiny little box. But we had to spend all that money on design, development, artwork, etc., that we would have had to, those prices did not go down by us putting it in a little box. The production cost of the individual units went down, but boy, did we need to sell a lot of units to make that the right plan. Fortunately, it worked out, and we did sell a lot of units. But so your component decisions are driven by a lot of different factors. So at the core is what's right for this particular game, and then and so I was kind of long-winded, but that's why we went with cards first here, and why we're sort of branching out into into other stuff as we're moving forward.
There's a very big practical advantage of card games over board games, especially if you're a amateur designer or beginning designer, not part of an existing bigger company, is building your prototype is so much easier. When I would first build prototypes of games, I would just take an existing card game like Magic, for example, and I'd take a Sharpie and turn the card over and just write on the back of the card what my new card for my new game did, put it in a sleeve, and suddenly I have a card game. And it was that simple. Whereas if you're going to make like a dice building game, or one where you need lots of punch out components or miniatures or whatever, if you don't have a lot of resources, how do you make that prototype? I mean, I've done that. Like I was once working on a game I called Vampire Chess, where I had a chessboard and I took checkers and I wrote a piece of paper that I stuck on one side of the checker what it did during the daytime. Then the other side of the checker, I taped a piece of paper with what the name of that piece was during the nighttime. And you can improvise, and often it'll end up buying a game with similar components. Like, okay, I'm going to buy Risk, so I've got little miniatures, and this is what the little horsey represents, and this is what the little cannon represents, just to get your prototype for deciding whether this is an interesting game or not. But card games make really easy prototypes, and that was definitely a practical advantage of it. But unfortunately, if you're designing something cool, it's not always going to be a card game. And I've been definitely impressed with some of the prototypes I've seen people make of non-card games. And that's often the key.
3D printing has gone a long way for that. Like basically, yes. Yeah, if you're a maker and you got a 3D printer, like you can make some really impressive prototypes.
And this is often one of the keys to getting, not the only key, but one of the keys to getting a game company to show interest in one of your games is to have a really impressive prototype, right? So If your prototype is very ugly and amateur looking, it can often overshadow how good your game mechanics are. So you often need to have a really wide variety of skills as a game designer, especially when you don't have the support of a whole company behind you at the beginning.
Okay, great. So Morgan wants to know even more. So you've developed this great game. He'd like to know more details about our business model. He asked on the Star Realms fan creative community page, and I think these are all really interesting questions, if we'd be willing to share. Curious about the business behind the games, like which of our games are most profitable? How does Kickstarter work in terms of driving the business? Is that really important for our cash flow? Have we thought about other distribution models? Just any information you're happy to share about the business behind the business.
So so this one falls more into my camp because the businessy side. So I've done a bunch of different game companies over the years, as I mentioned, and Kickstarter was a massive game changer. Like basically in previous companies, I would create I'd have a game and I'd work on it. Like Darwin often worked with me on, on games that I was working on. But I'd have a game and I'd get it to the point where I thought it was really fun. And then I would have to basically make that game, get visuals for it and components, and then take a prototype of that game and fly around to various game distributors, around the country or around the world, and show it to them, and show it to their sales staff, and be like, this game is awesome, and check it out. So you'd have to be able to get those appointments in the first place, and then pitch your game to them, and then go to conventions and pitch the game to individual customers, and cold call stores, and try and convince them that this was something that they'd want to get. But basically, you'd have to make the game and then have it, and then go around and do all these things with it. So you wouldn't see your first dollar until a long time downstream. So you'd basically be very, very limited in budget, which of course affects the quality of the components, the quality of the artwork you can have, etc. So the game mechanics might be awesome, but some of the other stuff, unless, if you're self-publishing, a little shaky compared to what a big company could put out. Kickstarter totally turned that around. Basically, you have to, obviously, your game design is still obviously the end of the day. That's a super important thing. But the ability to get people to look at what you're doing early on, to put in money early in the process, so you can turn around and use that money to hire and pay artists or graphic designers, etc., to buy better components. That completely changes the math on what you can put into the product. And obviously, we had Darwin and I had a huge amount of success with the original Star Realms Kickstarter. It raised $50,000, and we were able to invest that into continuing to, basically we had some of the art ready when we did the Kickstarter, but we we scraped up all our pennies. So Darren, Tan, and I scraped up all the pennies we could to basically get enough to do the Kickstarter with, but we could not have afforded to then get the rest of the artwork and actually print the game, etc., without money coming in from the Kickstarter. So basically, that, and then in turn, when Star Realms was really successful, it came out and people loved it, and that gave us some money, which we then could put into games ahead of time knowing that we were going to then bring that game to Kickstarter, and then hopefully it'd be successful on Kickstarter and more funds would come in. So Kickstarter totally freed us up to really spend a lot of money on things like artwork, for example. So I had mentioned before that, Star Realms had what we considered to be far better artwork than the other games that were out at the time. And basically we spent a lot more. We basically, not quite as much as what like Magic the Gathering type of game would spend on artwork, but a lot more than board games would normally spend on artwork. And when we got to later, after the first Star Realms was successful, our art spending went up, and we have like games like Epic, where it had like the base set had 124 unique pieces of art in a $15 box set, and it was like at TCG quality, or like the beautiful artwork in Sorcerer or Hero Realms, and the continuing Star Realm set. So getting back to sort of the overall picture, yes, Kickstarter, incredibly important, huge game changer, and the revenue from that is a big deal for us still as a company. It allows us to have, basically allows people to have salaries and eat. Like the money that comes in from that is a very, very big deal. It lets us pay our artists, etc. Obviously, our games are popular in distribution, and that channel is very important as well. But for the way we're functioning now, Kickstarter is a key component to basically allowing us to take the gloves off and spend like we're a big company, or even spend more. Like, frankly, a big company with shareholders and stuff might not be willing to spend the kind of money we spend on a particular game, or go as deep. Like, for us, they're still passion projects. Like, we still love what we're doing and really want to make the best thing we possibly can. And in a lot of cases, we probably could make more money if we were cutting certain corners or whatever. And we just, and we don't, and we we pour into those games a lot, and Kickstarter really allows that sort of thing to happen. And then, of course, for marketing and stuff, we go to conventions and we sell games directly there. That's those sales are awesome. They help pay for the shows, and that so shows like Gen Con, will sell a whole bunch of games at Gen Con itself. That basically there's a huge amount of expenses in like flying the staff to a show and buying a big booth and hotel rooms for everybody and shipping product around and the banners and the et cetera. So that's a way that we sort of spread the word about our games, and the sales that we get at those shows directly sort of help offset those costs. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I at least hit it right.
I think that when you're going to self-publish at any scale, even or at a large scale is what I'm trying to say, even with the existence of Kickstarter, it's not for the faint of heart. In our case, when I designed Star Realms and brought it to Rob and got his help with it, and Rob liked it so much, she's like, we should start our own company and publish this ourselves. At that point, I'd worked for multiple game companies. Rob had run multiple game companies. We both had some success in the industry. And even so, starting our own company for our own new game at that point, we each had to put some money in, as well as our digital partner put some money in, so we'd have some money to run off of. And what was it, like 2 years before we took any money back? Like we were working without salaries for about 2 years. So not just anyone can afford to do that, where not only are you not getting paid to do your work, you had to put money in to start the company so we can, have the money to create things and to do this kind of work. I mean, hopefully you can have a job on the side. I know Rob had multiple other ways he was earning money at the time. In my case, I was in my 40s and living with my parents. Like, basically, this is and we still had to get lucky despite our experience, despite our knowledge, despite the time and money that we had. Like it's really, it's not as easy as some people sometimes think. It's not for the faint of heart, and it requires real commitment. I remember a point that really stood out for me. We were working out of Rob's house. Like Rob's house was our office, and we had an office above Rob's garage, and we stored cases of Star Realms in his garage instead of a car. And UPS would come every week, and I'd be helping load cases of Star Realms into the truck. And so part of my role in the company was I had a strong back, for loading cases. And the UPS guy got to know us real well, and we'd have some interesting conversations as we're loading box after box and truck. And I remember saying to him, I'll know that the companies really start to make it when I'm paying someone else to be lifting boxes into a truck. So we have a warehouse now that's not in Rob's garage, but it took a long time to get there. And I think, people don't always realize what it's like at the beginning, but it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, and basically, anybody who's interested in self-publishing, it's fun. I've done it many times. Most of those times I lost money, but it had good time. And I lost money on things where basically the games were really good. People got, the people were big fans of them. In some cases, like the games are still around. Like Battleground Fantasy Warfare was one that I did, and I love that game, super fun. But we weren't able to basically pay ourselves to do it. So basically, you want to be set up with whatever you're doing to feed yourself and your family as an existing thing, and then you can dabble with your self-production on the side and basically treat it like a hobby. You're putting money into it. You're not going to see that money again. It's gone forever. And maybe you'll get lucky, but I think we went a little far afield there, but
Okay. Well, related to that, what's your favorite game design that you've designed outside of White Wizard Games? If you're Darwin.
For me, probably, so for outside of White Wizard Games, it'd probably be Battleground. So basically that, as I said, in the 80s and 90s, I did a lot of playing tabletop miniature games. And while I was a hobbyist in the, like painting models, etc., I really enjoyed the gameplay and the models. The fact that you'd have to, collect a bunch of figurines and paint them, etc., was a major barrier into getting, new players to play, etc. And I love that sort of tabletop general feel of moving troops around and through terrain and, and fighting. And so basically I worked to create a tabletop game experience that was, inexpensive. You get a little box of cards, and those represented units, and they had like an overhead view of the unit from the top of the card. So when you were playing on a table, if you put like a green tablecloth down and these units down, and we even made some like terrain that was some like plastic, basically laminated plastic unit terrain, so you'd have hills and stuff, and from top down it looked pretty cool, but you could have an army for like $15-$30 and design any army you wanted. And that game had some really I did a lot of work on the balancing of that game, and had really intricate point system that really captured the combat potential of a unit, and had had some really very accurate balancing. And I really enjoyed the working on all the rules for the various combat things like flanking and pinching and all the stuff that comes up. And a lot of people who played a bunch of tabletop games which were with miniatures said like Battleground is actually their favorite rule set for that style of play, and some of them even like reverse engineered it and then like made like trays of miniatures that would function in the same way as the cards. So like in that game, you literally had the cards on the table and you'd move them around with a ruler or with using the sides of the cards to rule as a ruler and move them around. So that was my favorite sort of design outside of current company. Darwin?
So I was lucky enough to work for Rob on that particular game and got to design a few sets for it, and that was super fun. But probably my favorite was I think the second card game I ever designed was a game called The Battle for Hill 218. It had a World War II flavor, and I chose the number 218 more or less at random because I wanted it to sound like a random hill that was being fought over. And I was trying to design a card game that could all come in a small box, that you only took 10 or 15 minutes to play, but had packed a lot of strategy so you then would want to play it again over and over and had amazing replayability. I guess a little bit of a foreshadowing for Star Realms in that way. The difference being that in this case, you had preset decks where my deck was identical to yours. The difference was the decks were in random order, so I didn't know what cards you had in your hand at any given time and what cards you were about to draw. But other than that, it had a very chess-like feel because I had sort of gotten sick of games where you just had a ton of stats or a ton of dice or just tons of information to figure out on the cards. I wanted something really simple. Like one of the things I really liked about chess, there are things a lot I don't like about chess, but one of the things I really liked is each playing piece in chess has a function that's simple enough that all I really need to know if I've played chess a couple times is the name of the piece, and I know what its function is. I know what a pawn does in chess because I played it a couple times and someone explained it to me, and then I don't need to have any stats written on a pawn. I just need to know this is a pawn. Same with a knight or a castle or a queen or a king, and I wanted it to be intuitive enough that you didn't have to play it many times to make that connection. So, for example, in Hill 218, I wanted the function of a tank to feel like a tank in the way it played in the game. So when I said, okay, I've got a tank now, I didn't have to look through the rule book to be like, what does a tank do again? Because the first time I played with a tank, it felt so much like a tank. It's now easy to remember, oh, I've got a tank. I know what that does. Oh, artillery, well, that shoots over other pieces to hit pieces that are far away. That makes sense that an artillery would feel that way. Paratroopers, I don't need to have them in my territory. I can land them in my opponent's territory because that's what paratroopers would do. And so I learned a lot about connecting flavor with game mechanics while I designed that game, while having a game that was simple and elegant. Because that's one of the things I like about a game like Ticket to Ride is there's a very limited number of actions on your turn. And it's very simple and elegant, yet there's so much strategy and depth to it that when you have an experienced Ticket to Ride player playing against an inexperienced Ticket to Ride player, the experienced player has a huge advantage and will usually win. And then as the other person gets more experienced, the matchup gets more interesting. And so I wanted a game that was really simple and elegant, tied flavor and mechanics really nicely. It had enough depth and strategy that you had so much replayability, and I really feel like that connected with a lot of people who tried the Battlefield 2 team. A few years ago, they even made an app for it. I don't know if the app still exists because I'm not sure the company still exists, but it was a really nice game that I'm really proud of it.
And also, Steve Jackson Games made teamed up with Your Move Games, the company that we did these games with, and made a version of Hill 218 combined with their Ogre license. I believe it's 219 Battle for 219. I think it is Hill 219 or Sector 219.
There was. I did design a sequel called the Battle for Sector 219, which is a whole separate game. So there's
okay, sorry, yeah.
for Hill 218, there's the Battle for Sector 219, and then there's the Ogre version of Hill 218, which is a separate game. So yeah, if you're familiar with Steve Jackson Games and their product Ogre, which a lot of people are, they did have a team up with Your Move Games where they made a crossover game between Ogre and Hill 218. It reminds me, I'm seeing a lot of people in the comments asking if we're ever going to do a crossover between like Hero Realms and Star Realms or Epic and Star Realms.
Yeah.
That could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, actually, I popped that one up. Do you have any comments on that crossover? Like a spaceship crashing in the Hero Realms universe was mentioned.
Yeah, I basically cool ideas. I've toyed around with some game concepts which were sort of mashups of all of our worlds, and ideas like you're suggesting could be super fun. Definitely a lot of cool area to explore there. We don't have anything like that currently in the pipeline, but yeah, definitely cool ideas.
So from a flavor perspective, stuff like that is already really interesting. Like when I used to be a huge collector of comic books, and any time they had a crossover between DC and Marvel, my head exploded. I'm like, I have to have that. So I understand the appeal of that. A major challenge between crossing over Hero Realms and Star Realms is we specifically wanted them to have a different feel. And so while the game mechanics have a lot of similarities, it is hard to mix them because we made Hero Realms with a different tempo than with Star Realms. So for example, a 7-cost card in Hero Realms will typically be more powerful than a 7-cost card in Star Realms, or a 3-cost card in Hero Realms will typically be more powerful than a 3-cost card in Star Realms. They'll be consistent within their game. So 3-cost Hero Realms cards will have similar power levels to each other, and 3-cost Star Realms cards will have a similar power level to each other. But while Star Realms has a particular tempo, Hero Realms has a faster tempo. So a game of Hero Realms will get wild and crazy a little bit faster than Star Realms will, which some people think is great, some people not so great. But now you have a choice. If you like this tempo, that might be a reason to play Star Realms. If you like the faster tempo, that might be a reason to play Hero Realms. But it does mean that if you combine them and you're like, oh, I've got 3 gold or whatever, and I'm trying to decide whether to get a 3-cost ship or a 3-cost champion, generally you're going to want to take the Hero Realms card. It doesn't mean we couldn't do a crossover. There's no way to do a crossover, but that is a significant challenge that would present.
Yeah, we could do a flavor crossover where we had a new game with its own mechanics that took.
We just couldn't use existing cards. We'd have to use all new cards.
Yeah, exactly. Because basically the various games aren't, obviously like for example with Epic, it's or Sorcerer completely different systems than the Realms game. So, but yeah, I mean, crossing over the universes using some of that, storytelling could be pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
I had a couple Epic questions. So, are you considering banning certain cards for constructed play, and also, are you considering doing foil Epic cards in real life? So
yes and yes. So one of the great things about Epic is it plays like a trading card game, but you don't have to chase cards. Like basically there's no super valuable, expensive cards or whatever. So when a game like Magic the Gathering, has a card that's out of control, it's often like one of their mythic rares because they tend to make their harder to find cards more powerful. And then because it's so hard to find and it's winning in tournaments all the time, it gets to be crazy expensive, like, $30, $40, $100 for an individual card. And then they ban it and somebody's like just paid $400, got 4 copies of this card for their awesome deck, and they're like, I'm going to go to the big tournament, and then ban list. Oh, your card's now worth $8 because so it's very, very painful in trading card games when those bannings come. But in Epic, everybody can get everything in the physical game very cheaply, in the digital game for free, literally. Like you download the app, you can play as much as you want. You own every single card. Infinite copies. You can make any constructed deck. There's no barrier whatsoever. So it's very easy for us to ban cards without negatively impacting players. So there's a couple different things we will be doing with Constructed and Epic. One, if certain cards are out of control in some way, we will ban them over time. We banned a small number, a handful of cards in the original game. Did get banned. And so we will ban things, if they're out of control. Obviously, we want to make sure that the players have time to react, and sometimes a card's not broken, a strategy is just dominant, and until someone goes, oh, they're doing this, if I build my deck this way, I can beat that. So we want to give we don't want to be overly knee-jerk and ban things that that could be balanced with the existing card pool. People just haven't built for it yet. So that's a factor. But yes, we're totally willing to ban things in Epic, and that's under consideration. Another thing that we can do with Epic very easily is change up the constructed format. So because it's very easy to have whatever card you want, and nothing's gone forever. You can buy in physical, you can buy the old copies, old sets. In digital, you just have every card. So we're doing Constructed with just everything that's in the app, but it's very easy for us to modify the card pool. And so we can potentially rotate card pools. We could, as a random example, we could have a tournament season where in Constructed we ban the 10 most popular cards from the previous Constructed season, with the goal of getting people to try new strategies and do new stuff. Or we can use any combination of cards or sets that we want to use for the Constructed environment. Obviously we have a big Constructed event coming up. We had a monthly championship, and now we've got we've got the Legend Series tournament coming on Sunday. And if it's turning out that a particular deck is dominant and not and people can't beat it with other strategies, yeah, sure, we'll add cards to the ban list, and get it to the point where the environment opens up again. Like we found with our in-house tournaments that a large variety of decks were created, viable, interesting, people winning with different stuff. But, over time with large groups of people playing, it's definitely possible for dominant strategies to come up. And when they do, we'll come in and, we'll basically tweak things in such a way that opens back up for a whole variety of different constructed decks.
So I don't know if the person who asked the question only plays digital, but if they only play digital, what they might not realize is that we have banned a card in Epic. And when we do ban a card, we just don't put it in digital. So there was a card that came out in the paper version of Epic that we found unbalanced constructed play and wasn't fun to play against, and made for some deck interaction we weren't happy with. So we banned it for tournament play. And then when we put that set into the app, we just didn't put that card in the app. So if you only played digitally, you would never know that we had banned a card, because why would we put a banned card in? But and obviously we can then do it in digital too. We can remove a card. It's just as easy to remove a card as to not put one in. But
and cards are fine for limited, and then then we can have we can have it in, but not have it available in your deck builder when you go to Constructed. Right. But it might pop up in Draft, and that's totally cool too. And it's one of the.
Not only are we willing to ban cards, we have banned a card.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to the 2 hours. I wanted to do one final sorcerer question here, and then there was a few more technical questions that came in about the app on Star Realm. So if Rob and Darwin are okay with staying on for a little bit extra, we can pop through a few of those, if that's okay with.
Sure.
I want to check and make sure that's okay with both of you, because I know some people probably really want to hear the answers to those, but I kind of group them together.
All right, we'll try and shorten our answers down.
So for Sorcerer, someone had asked if we plan to have more lore or art books for Sorcerer, so that there's a story for every character, domain, and lineage.
So Short answer, yes. Basically, there are stories for every, Peter has stories behind every character, every lineage, every domain. That exists. In a lot of cases, you can find those, like if you dig around, like on the original Sorcerer Kickstarter page. On like the sides of the box, there's lore on the characters that are in their box, in the in the lineages. You can find some stuff in the in the rule books, and Kickstarter updates and stuff. So basically, we've got lore sprinkled around, and and we're actually working on more lore. We're going to be having updates for the Endbringer Kickstarter that ended recently. We're going to be having lore updates for some of the new stuff that got unlocked through stretch goals. We're basically taking the sort of lore framework that Peter has and filling it out a little, and we're going to have lore updates for that as well. But yeah, we're very interested in doing something like a lore book, art and lore book for Sorcerer, because it is such a rich world, and we do have so much so much cool stuff, content for it. So yeah, that is definitely something we're considering. Whether that would be something that would appear as an add-on in a Kickstarter or be its own product, something that we do a separate thing for, I'm not sure. But yes, that is something we're strongly looking into.
Okay, great. So I'm going to dive into some of the detailed Star Realms app questions. I know everyone who's on here that's been on for 2 hours, thank you so much. I said at the beginning, we'll just end this naturally. It probably isn't going to go for 2 hours. Maybe I shouldn't have scheduled it for 2 hours. So thank you, everyone, for coming and asking your questions. If we haven't answered every single question so we'll stay on for a little bit longer to answer some of the questions that were sent in ahead of time, because those people really put their questions in ahead of time. I want to make sure we get those answered. But we, like Rob was saying earlier, we do a live cast every Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. on the White Wizard Games Facebook page. It also streams to other places like YouTube and the Twitch channel, and you can bring questions there as well. So if we didn't get your question answered, or you have one that you weren't sure if you should ask, bring it on Tuesdays, and we're going to continue on here. And I just also wanted to remind people that we have a live stream tonight. I put it in the comments from 8 to 10 of Epic card game with CJ Moynihan, and we'll be doing some prize giveaways. I was giving away prizes in the comments, Rob and Darwin, because I didn't want to, you guys were covering so much awesome stuff. And I'll do one more prize giveaway before we wrap this up as well. So anyone that won prizes, I'll follow up with an email. So diving into these difficult questions, should you scrap Scouts or Vipers first?
Vipers.
So I'm in the depends category. It depends on what's going on in the game. So basically, the general knee-jerk reaction is scrap your Vipers first, because that's usually the right call. If you buy a scrapping card in like the first or second go around, you're almost always going to want to get rid of those Scouts. Vipers. So you'll draw more Scouts to buy stuff. But depending on what's happening in the game, sometimes your deck's leaning aggressive. You didn't get your scrapping until a certain point in the game. Occasionally, I will go Scouts first, but 90% of the time, I scrap Vipers first.
Yes, so 90% is actually a pretty good point for me too. I generally value the ability to scrap cards from my deck high, so I'll take those cards very early. So usually when I start scrapping, it's early enough in the game that, yes, if I can scrap Vipers, I will, because I like to design my decks for the long game. I want to be acquiring really expensive ships and bases that are really powerful for making relatively powerful deck that can go on and on. The longer the game goes, the more it is to my advantage. I'm not trying to end the game quickly, so I need trade more than I need combat. But yeah, if for some reason it takes me a while to get to getting scrapping, and it's at the point of the game where the game is almost over, and at some point combat just has way more value than trade. I mean, there will reach a point in the game where trade has almost zero value. So sure, I'll scrap Scouts then, but as Rob said, 90% of the time, Vipers first.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's been some talk of launching a pro mode, this is from Bry, by the player base that will allow players to activate ally abilities. And like in another question that came up about the missions, they want to complete the missions when they want to complete the missions as opposed to have them auto-complete. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something that might be possible? What would the players need to do to convince you to do this?
So basically, this is a really tough area. So when we first designed the Star Realms app, it was a 100% mirror of the physical app, and basically, you play your blob fighter, you play another blob fighter, you click on your blob fighter to activate its ally ability, you click on the other blob fighter to activate its ally ability. You know, like you didn't have to click on them. You didn't have to play all the cards in your hand. Like basically, it just mirrored the physical game exactly. And basically, it bogs the game down. Like basically, it made it a click fest. And what we played around with automating certain things. So we thought about it and we're like, what things do most of the time, like 90% of the time, you just want to do when they happen. And so like, for example, card draw was among the things where it's like, yep, you're just almost always, you just want to do that as soon as possible. So we took all the things that you usually would always want to do, and we had the app do those things automatically. And oh my God, the game got so much more fun because it played so much faster and smoother, etc. So then came the question of, okay, do we obviously do we want to let people choose? Problem with letting people choose to be able to do this is if you're at all competitive, it is better from a winning the game standpoint to be able to choose when to do it than to have it done for you automatically. If I'm playing and there is the option that I can choose, and that will give me a slight competitive advantage, and I know my opponents might have done that, I'm going to feel as a competitive person, I feel forced. I have to play that way now. So I can't, like I'm too competitive to be like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'll just have my stuff go automatically. You go ahead and choose when your abilities go off, and be able to occasionally pull off that thing where you have your carrier buy a card and your fighter put it into your hand, where I'm just where I don't get to choose my order. So basically, and because the play is less fun, as an app, it's less fun to have those choices. It's much more, the game's faster and more fun and more dynamic when those things are going off. If we give players the choice, we're kind of forcing everybody who's semi-competitive to basically play at a disadvantage or play a game that's clunkier. So that's why we went the way we did, and why we probably will not allow people to select that option, because if we give one player the option to do it, who wants to do it, the other player suffers or has to do it too. Like that's, anyway, Darwin, I don't know if you have anything.
There's also some other practical considerations. Like with the missions, we could have a variant potentially where, okay, with this variant, you can choose when to activate your missions as opposed to them activating optional. So and maybe both players have to choose that option. Anytime we create more variants and more options, we're splitting the player base. So, okay, as it were now, I can select I want to play with missions and Star Realms United Heroes, and I want to play with events, and I want to play with Core Set, and that's the only thing I want. So let me start a game. I have to wait for an opponent who chose the exact same things as me before I get an opponent. However, fortunately, we have the quick play option, so you might get matched up to someone in quick play who has those sets, and your game will get started quickly. But the more options we give them, the longer it might take you to get a game, and the more we're splitting our player base. That's one practical option. And we're already forced to do that when we come up with new sets, so we don't want to make it even worse. The other big practical option is, for every little tweak and every little variation we want to create, we have to tell the digital team, hey, you know how you're working on Hero Realms or Epic or the next Star Realms set? Pause that, because we want to create this variation using existing Star Realms sets. And we have to decide that that's actually the right decision on our part when, we've got people dying for a Hero Realms app or for the next Star Realms set or whatever. And we are, the size company we don't have an infinite digital staff. So we constantly have to make practical decisions like that. And it's going to be rare that specific type of thing is going to be the correct decision for us as a company, as much fun as it might be for a specific group of players. Hopefully we're giving you enough content and enough cool content that you're still going to have an awesome time, and you'll forgive us if we don't make a certain exact variant. But I understand why you'd like it. If I could snap my fingers and have it happen successfully, I would, because I would like those variants too. But like I said, there's practical consideration.
Yeah.
Okay, another request. One of the things that would aid in analyzing play would be exportable log. This may be something we need to check in with the digital team, or maybe you guys already have. Another would be the ability to pause and rewind with the playback. So people have coaches and mentors in Star Realms, and it would be great if their coach could look and review their game without having to do a screen cap or take a video.
Yeah, that would be cool. I have no idea. Sometimes these things are actually wicked easy for the digital team to do. Sometimes they're incredibly difficult, and I do not know where that would fall. But that's a cool idea. I like, I think replays and a little more data on games is super neat. And it is, if it's not going to significantly delay other things that we're doing, that's the kind of thing I would totally be in.
And the good news is there are existing ways out there where you can record your own games. Obviously, they're asking, well, it'd be nice if you did it for us, but at least it is possible. So if you're doing that thing, I recommend recording your own games, because you never know when you might get a unicorn and you want to show your video off on Facebook or something.
Yeah, so thanks, Mark, for that suggestion. The next question is from Derek Thompson. Hey, I'm paraphrasing, why don't we have a $500 a month tournament for Star Realms? That would be really great. Is there any possibility or thought to doing in-app prize tournaments for Star Realms?
Sure. So, so basically, tournament functionality is something that we're working towards in Star Realms, and obviously, so right now, for example, we've got these tournaments we're doing digitally, and the this weekend at Gen Con, and the Star Realms one, we're going to be running manually using using like outside software and telling people, all right, challenge this person, etc. And in the Epic one, it's actually built within the app. As for reasons I talked about earlier, because Epic was a newer app and they were building it from the ground up, that tournament functionality was sort of part of the design from the beginning, so we were able to get it in there faster, and we're looking to take the lessons learned there and import them into Star Realms to have more more functionality for tournaments within the in the app as things progress. But frankly, the reason why Epic had cash prize events as part of its sort of original design was because it was mirroring the sort of trading card game experience, and basically that's something that exists a lot in those types of competitions exist a lot in trading card games. Things that you build your constructed deck for, etc., giving sort of people a reason to sort of spend the time on the deck construction, etc. So we wanted to sort of mirror that experience for the players who might be coming in from the outside and and checking out Epic. But the question of, is that something we might do for Star Realms? Yeah, absolutely. And is our tournaments something that we're looking at putting in the app for Star Realms? Yes, we're definitely putting in tournaments, whether they'll be cash prize tournaments or content prize tournaments, like the Legends or Legend Series style tournaments. That part hasn't been figured out, but we definitely want to have the tournament experience within the app. And when I was talking about the things that we did at Origins that year, where we last year when we did the Origins championships events, we had cash prize event for Star Realms and a cash prize event for Epic, so we had cash prize events for both. So it's definitely something that we have done before, and may do again. Currently, we can't do it in Star Realms because we don't have that functionality within the app, but that functionality is coming.
All right, more questions. Mark Stang, would it be possible to open up the challenge API so that it could be integrated with Challenge or Battlefy? Well, I think you already answered this question. We're working on putting tournaments into the app. But
yeah, although I think, so basically while that may be possible, it's something I have to talk to the digital team about. What we want to do is actually bring 100% of the tournament within the app itself. So basically you join the tournament within the app, your pairings come up in the app, etc. And then the community, potentially we could open things up to the community, be like, hey, like if the Facebook community wanted to do a particular tournament or whatever, we could potentially, create the ability within the app for that to happen. That's some functionality I'd have to look at over time, but likely we won't, unless they're super easy for the digital team to do, we probably won't go down that road of using the API to be able to link up with the like challenge site or whatever, because we'd rather fully incorporate the events into the app. So that's probably the route that we're going to take.
All right, great. So this is a question about the tech cards. From Sandor, will there be countering cards for the tech cards in High Alert or in later sets, or the fact that they continuously require resources makes them balanced without counters?
So I can't say never to a mechanic like, getting rid of something like, getting rid of a hero that's on the table or getting rid of a tech. Currently there is no, and the stuff that we currently have in the pipeline, there is no way to get rid of your opponent's tech. The fact that they do have a cost associated with them is a balancing factor. However, there will become a point in the game where a tech card is incredibly sweet, and and you want it. And one of the coolest things playing with tech is when there's a piece of tech out there from fairly early in the game, and it's not quite worth it in the early game, but it's going to be insanely good in the late game, and sort of judging when the game is transitioning to the point where I better grab that thing before my opponent does is really interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when we design a card that stays in play that your opponent can't attack or destroy, we're hyper aware of that when we're balancing the card. So we can do things with bases that we can't do with tech or heroes because, okay, it's super powerful, but at least your opponent can get rid of it. So we have to understand when we design a piece of tech that once it eventually hits play, it's there for the rest of the game. And how can the design of the card reflect that so that way the game's still fun and fair? And once tech comes out and you've played with it, hopefully you'll see what we see, that we have balanced it in such a way that we've achieved that. And we think that this is design space worth exploring, and that is something that makes it different than a base, the fact that, it's not attackable or whatever. So, I think we've managed to pull it off in a really nice fashion, and I hope that when it comes out, you guys will agree.
Great. And then, I'm not sure the answer to this question, but do you have plans on how the commander decks will be integrated into the app? Will they be treated as a regular expansion or some other way?
Yeah, so this has been actually a source of much discussion within our team on commanders. Like, would we treat them like gambits where, okay, I choose to play with commanders, but I don't choose which commander to play with? Or do you get to select which commander you're playing and your opponent does the same? Do we release the commanders all at once? Do we release them individually, or in pairs, or et cetera? So this, and this isn't an area where we're 100% settled. We're obviously moving forward with the, application, the programming them into the digital app, et cetera. My leanings are, or I think our leanings are to have it have them selectable. So you select which commander you play with, and your opponent can do the same. And occasionally we might have arena formats where you get a random commander, and that's just part of the deal. I think that players will really want to be able to select which commander they play with, and it may turn out with the vast number of games that get played digitally that a particular commander is a little bit better, or a particular commander is a little bit worse. So it's possible we might do some power modification, like tweak up or down the stats on commanders, or modify their cards slightly. So errata is possible on those. Normally with Star Realms, things are symmetric in that basically, okay, yeah, it may be that the cutter is overpowered for its cost, but they're shuffled in the deck. Both of us have a chance to get them, and it's kind of fun to be like, oh my gosh, there's this cool card out, I want to grab it. So it's basically it's sort of self-balancing in that aspect. Like, obviously we try and get the power level of cards to be fair, but if a card occasionally shows up in the market that's a little bit unfair one way or the other, it's okay. Both players had a shot at it before the game started, so it's just sort of a random element that's within the game itself. But with legendary commanders, you get them from the beginning of the game, and so the balance there is more important. Obviously, Darwin and I did our best to balance those, but a finite number of people can only play so many games. So getting the amount of data that we'll get in when these get programmed into the app, and thousands and thousands of people are playing them, we'll monitor that. And if something if a particular commander is running away with the percentages, we can always adjust, and then we can put that errata on our website for people who play physically who choose to use it. Obviously, it's your own game, you can play however you want. But if we do balance stuff, we'll make that information available. So if physical players want to mirror that, they would be able to.
So unfortunately, I live alone with 2 dogs, Molly and Damsel.
And they got to go out.
They've both been reminding me that they're overdue to go outside and go to the bathroom. So I'm going to need Rob to take over here.
Yeah. All right.
We can wrap up. I mean, we can answer these questions in the community page as well, so I can go over them with Rob, and if there's any that I need answers from you.
Thank you, everybody.
And we'll get them answered in the community page.
Yeah, we appreciate you sticking around. I know we went a little long here, but that was super fun.
It's been fun, yeah. We really appreciate everyone participating.
Bye-bye.